Here are 8 extremely rich Malaysian people who live like they're broke, and their spending habits will genuinely make you scream. We're talking a billionaire whose entire breakfast is a quarter of a pineapple, the richest Malaysian whose own mother refused the car he gifted her, and a tycoon who walked the streets alone while kidnappers were hunting men exactly like him. Let's get into the full countdown. Number 8. Koon Yu Yin. Let's kick this off with a man whose breakfast is going to make you feel ridiculous about your morning routine. Because Koon Yu Yin, a guy who co-founded 3 of the biggest construction companies in all of Malaysia, ate the same tiny breakfast for years. You ready? A quarter of a pineapple, a glass of water, and a cup of coffee. That's it. Then nothing else until a light lunch. Most of us spend more on a single takeout order than this man spent feeding himself in a week. But to understand the breakfast, you have to understand where he came from. Koon was born back in 1933 into a big, dirt-poor family, and his father ran a modest little coffin shop. Not exactly a launchpad to billions. Yet he grinded his way to a diploma in civil engineering, started at the Public Works Department, and went on to co-found Gamuda, IJM, and Mudajaya, 3 absolute giants of the industry. Think about that leap. Coffin shop to construction empire. Then comes the plot twist. In 1983, serious heart problems forced him out of active management. For most people, that's the end of the story. For Koon, it was Act 2. He pivoted to contrarian stock investing, which is a fancy way of saying he bought what everyone else was too scared to touch. He started with 200,000 ringgit and went hunting during market panics, most famously scooping up bargains during the Hong Kong property crash of the early 1980s. While everyone else ran for the exits, he calmly walked in and went shopping. And he kept that monk-like simplicity his entire life, which stretched all the way to 93 years old. No luxury cars, no vacation homes, no fancy gadgets. He spent his retirement writing blog posts under his initials, KYY, sharing investing wisdom and roasting bad corporate governance for free. But here's the part that hits hardest. Koon flat out believed you can't take your money with you when you die. So he wrote it directly into his will. Every remaining asset, liquidated, all of it to charity. And while he was still alive, he was already donating millions every year to send poor students to university. Koon turned a quarter pineapple into a philosophy. Our next billionaire turned an entire workday into his idea of fun. Number 7. Tan Sri Dr. Lim Wee Chai. Quick question. When was the last time you described going to work as your hobby? Not your job, your hobby, the thing you do for fun. Because that's exactly how Lim Wee Chai talks about it, and the man is dead serious. Lim is the founder of Top Glove, and you've almost certainly used his product without ever knowing his name. He built the company from a single factory with 1 production line into the largest manufacturer of disposable gloves on planet Earth. When the whole world suddenly needed protective gloves, his factories were the ones supplying a huge chunk of them. That's the scale we're dealing with here. But forget the gloves for a second, because Lim's lifestyle is the real headline. He lives by a personal wellness code he literally invented and named the 5 quality wells: clean well, eat well, work well, exercise well, and sleep well. And he doesn't just say it, he lives it with almost frightening discipline. In 2018, he went full organic vegetarian, deliberately cutting out commercially farmed fish and animal protein because he didn't trust the chemicals and growth hormones in the feed. And his relationship with work, genuinely unhinged in the best way. His personal motto is, and I quote, "Work is my hobby, exercise is my duty, and health is my wealth." The man works 7 days a week and doesn't take vacations, not because he's chained to a desk, but because he honestly enjoys it more than lying on a beach. Here's where the frugality gets almost comically intense. Lim runs his personal life exactly like he runs his factories, obsessively tracking his own resource use. We're talking carefully watching how much food, electricity, and stuff he consumes, refusing to waste a single thing. This is a man worth around $1 billion policing his own light switches. And what does he do with the money he isn't spending on yachts and supercars? He pours millions into education, funding endowed professorships in lifestyle medicine and public health at major universities like the National University of Singapore and Nanyang Technological University. He turned his obsession with health into a gift for everyone else. Lim treats his own body like his greatest asset. Our next tycoon treated his trees the exact same way. And yes, I mean that literally. Speaking of treating your body like your greatest asset, that's exactly what pulled someone on our team to the Pulse R8 Smart Ring. It reads your heart rate, your sleep, and your workouts right from your finger. A week on a charge, 100 days with the case, and it's fully waterproof. The surprise was the price. Under $40, a fraction of the big-name rings because it comes direct instead of through the retailers that mark everything up. If you're watching on your TV, pause and scan the QR code on screen with your phone camera, or tap the first link in the description. Because our next tycoon treated his trees the exact same way. And yes, that means literally singing to them. Number 6. The late Tan Sri Lee Shin Cheng. Imagine a billionaire walking through a field, gently talking and singing to a row of oil palm trees like they're old friends. Sounds made up, right? It's not. They actually called Lee Shin Cheng the tree whisperer, because he genuinely believed singing to his crops helped him judge how healthy and productive they were. A multi-billionaire serenading his plantation. I promise you it gets better. Lee was the founder of the IOI Group, a massive empire built on palm oil and property that grew into one of the leading agribusinesses in the entire world. But he started with absolutely nothing. Born into a poor family during brutal economic times, he couldn't even finish high school and had to start working early just to help his family survive. So every bit of that fortune was clawed out of the ground, often, literally. And he was a fierce operator when it counted. His most legendary move was taking over a company called Palmco in a high-stakes bidding war, going head-to-head against the corporate titans Sime Darby and winning. So don't mistake the gentle tree singing for softness. The man was a stone-cold dealmaker when the moment called for it. But here's the contrast that defines him. Despite a net worth north of $4.7 billion, ranking him among the richest men in the country, Lee had zero interest in luxury. None. He didn't know the brands, didn't want the brands, and was genuinely more comfortable in a pair of cheap shorts and a plain shirt than in any expensive suit. Picture the wealthiest man in the room dressed like he just wandered in from doing yard work. And that wasn't an act. True to his farming roots, he would regularly show up at IOI's corporate headquarters in the evenings, still wearing his casual, estate-worn clothes, looking nothing like the boss of the whole operation. While other tycoons spent on personal toys, Lee spent almost everything on two things: buying more land to grow his empire and pouring money into Chinese community schools. He'd lived the pain of having his education cut short, and he was determined no kid coming after him would hit that same wall. Lee built his fortune out of dirt and refused to forget it. Our next man did something even bolder. He took a poisoned, abandoned wasteland and turned it into a city. Number 5. Tan Sri Dr. Jeffrey Chia. Here's a guy who runs a conglomerate worth over 76 billion ringgit, develops some of the most valuable property in Malaysia, and checks the time on a basic plastic Casio watch. Not a Rolex, not a Patek, a Casio. The kind you can grab for the price of a nice lunch. That single detail tells you everything about Jeffrey Chia. Chia grew up in a small, beaten-down tin mining town called Pusing, in Perak, and what he saw there shaped his entire life. He watched open-cast mining tear the land apart, and he watched families get trapped in poverty once the mining money dried up and left nothing behind but scarred earth. That image of devastation never left him. So in 1974, with 100,000 ringgit, he started his own little tin mining company. Pretty ordinary so far. Then he made the move that turned him into a legend. He bought a giant, completely mined-out wasteland near Kuala Lumpur, a toxic, useless eyesore that nobody wanted. And instead of flipping it, he undertook a massive reclamation project to heal the land itself. That poisoned wasteland is now Bandar Sunway City, a globally celebrated, genuinely sustainable green township where thousands of people live, study, and work. He didn't just build on the land. He brought it back from the dead. And this is the key to understanding Chia. He sees his wealth as stewardship, not ownership. He's basically just managing it on behalf of everyone else. That's why a man overseeing a fortune like his happily wears a durable little Casio and skips the flashy property developer lifestyle entirely. To him, practical function will always beat status, every single time. But his biggest flex isn't a watch or a township. It's what he did with his education business. Chia took his entire ownership of the Sunway Group's educational institutions, the universities, the schools, all of it, and transferred it into the Jeffrey Chia Foundation, a non-profit trust. Read that again. He gave away ownership of his own schools. Now that foundation is on track to hand out over R1 billion in scholarships and research grants. Which means the profits from his educational empire don't flow back to him or his family. They flow straight back into society, funding the next generation of poor kids trying to climb out forever. He built a money machine and pointed it permanently at the public. Chia quietly gave his empire away. Our next man went a step further and tried to erase himself from the party scene entirely. Number 4. Tan Sri Syed Mokhtar al-Bukhari. Picture the most powerful business galas in the country, the kind where every tycoon shows up in a custom Italian suit to be seen. Now picture the one major player who refuses to come, even when the party is being thrown by his own company. That's Syed Mokhtar al-Bukhari, and his allergy to the spotlight is almost legendary. Al-Bukhari is Malaysia's most prominent Bumiputera entrepreneur, and his empire is staggering. National ports, transport logistics, automotive manufacturing, utilities, the kind of critical infrastructure a whole country runs on. But he was born into severe poverty in Kedah and couldn't even finish secondary school. As a teenager, he was helping his father trade cattle and plant vegetables just to get by. Then, in the early 1970s, he got a government loan and started a humble little transport company with just 2 Mercedes trucks. From 2 trucks, he built a machine that eventually swallowed up MMC Corporation, which runs the major port of Tanjung Pelepas, and DRB Highcom, the parent company of the national carmaker Proton. Now here's where the "lives like he's poor" part gets almost unbelievable for a man this powerful. Forget the custom suits. His standard outfit is a long-sleeved batik shirt, plain trousers, and simple sandals. And when he flies, he turns his nose up at first class, riding economy or business only when he absolutely has to. The man who owns the national car company doesn't import some flashy BMW or Lexus. He drives a locally made Proton Perdana, the same kind of car a regular Malaysian family drives. So what does a guy like this spend on? Almost nothing on himself. His personal expenses are practically invisible. Instead, he funnels his enormous cash flows straight into the Al-Bukhari Foundation. And this isn't small-time charity. The foundation built and funds the Islamic Arts Museum in Kuala Lumpur. It builds entire universities, and it has handed out thousands of scholarships to underprivileged students who remind him exactly of his younger self. And his whole worldview comes down to one line. He measures success not by how much you pile up, but by how much you're able to give back. For Al-Bukhari, the sandals aren't a sacrifice. They're the whole point. Al-Bukhari hid from the spotlight by choice. Our next man hid from nothing and built one of the great comeback empires from a roadside snack stall. Number 3. Tan Sri Lee Thiam Wah. If you've ever shopped at a 99 Speed Mart in Malaysia, and millions of people do every single day, you've walked into the empire of a man who started by selling snacks from a tiny stall outside his own house. And his backstory will absolutely floor you. Lee Thiam Wah was born in Klang to a construction worker and a hawker, so money was tight from day one. But then it got so much harder. At just 8 months old, he contracted polio, which left him permanently in a wheelchair for the rest of his life. Between his disability and his family's poverty, he only managed 6 years of formal schooling. 6 years. That's the entire educational foundation this multi-billionaire was working with. So he started where he could, selling snacks from a roadside stall. He saved up, opened a small sundry shop in 1987, sold that, and in 1992 launched the very first 99 Speed Mart. And he did not stop. Today, 99 Speed Mart captures around 40% of the entire mini-mart sector in Malaysia. Then, in August 2024, he pulled off a massive $531 million public offering, officially cementing him as a multi-billionaire. From a wheelchair and a snack stall to a $500 million IPO. Let that sink in. But here's the beautiful part. Lee never once forgot the working-class people his stores actually serve, because he is one of them. And his frugality is baked right into the business. His 99 Speedmart stores are deliberately small, plain, and stripped down. No fancy decor, no expensive aesthetic upgrades. Also, the overhead stays low, and the savings get passed straight to ordinary shoppers. And this next detail is the one that gives me chills. Because Lee knows exactly what it's like to navigate the world in a wheelchair, he insists on installing wheelchair-accessible ramps at every single one of his thousands of stores. And he means it so seriously that he has taken legal action against contractors who failed to build those ramps properly. He turned his own hardest struggle into a guarantee for everyone who shares it. He lives a quiet, unflashy life focused on his family, constant self-education, and his community, while expanding into things like the regional Burger King franchise and a stake in Alliance Bank. The fortune exploded. The man never changed. Lee refused to let a wheelchair define his limits. Our next man refused to let a wave of kidnappers change how he walked his own streets. Number 2. The late Tan Sri Lo Boon Siu. In the early 1990s, kidnappers in Penang were specifically hunting wealthy men, snatching them for ransom. So every rich man in the city locked himself behind bodyguards and tinted windows. Every rich man except one. Lo Boon Siu kept walking the streets of Georgetown completely alone, no security, no entourage, basically daring the universe. And to understand that kind of nerve, you have to hear how he started. Lo was born in 1915 in Fujian, China, and arrived in Penang at just 12 years old with no education and speaking only Hokkien. His childhood was crushing poverty, the kind where he literally collected pig dung to use as fuel. In Penang, he scraped by as a scrap metal collector, a rickshaw puller, and an apprentice mechanic, washing buses late into the night for just a few cents. That's rock bottom. That's as low as it gets. But the man had vision. At just 18 years old, he took his entire life savings of $2,000 and bought 11 secondhand buses. Then he reconditioned them with his own mechanic's hands and resold them for a massive profit. That hustle was the seed of everything. Then came the moment that made him a legend. On a trip to Japan in 1958, he spotted the Honda Super Cub motorcycle and immediately understood it was going to be huge. So he went straight to the source and personally convinced Soichiro Honda, the founder himself, to hand him the exclusive rights to distribute Honda in Malaysia. They started calling him Mr. Honda, and he built a motorcycle empire. And yet, through all of it, Lo never stopped acting like the humble mechanic he'd trained to be. He lived a deeply modest life in Penang and stayed completely accessible to ordinary people. Which brings us back to those kidnappers. While the city's elite hid in fear, Lo simply refused to change who he was. He kept strolling Georgetown on his own, because turning into a paranoid guarded rich man was a betrayal of everything he stood for. He aimed his fortune at the people instead of himself, building the Lam Hua E Hospital to give the poor quality, affordable medical care, funding an old folks' home, and matching public donations dollar for community causes. Right up until he passed in 1995, he stayed exactly what he'd always been, a humble man who happened to be rich. Lo's humility came from a brutal childhood. So does our number 1, the richest of them all, and it all traces back to one unforgettable lesson from his mother. Number 1. Robert Kwok Hock Nien. We finish with the richest of them all. Robert Kwok controls a global empire spanning sugar, shipping, real estate, palm oil, and the luxury Shangri-La hotel chain, with a fortune somewhere north of $12 billion. He is the wealthiest man in Malaysia. And the single best story about him isn't about how he made the money. It's about a Mercedes he tried to give away. But first, the rise. Kwok got his start during the messy post-colonial transition of Malaya, working briefly for Mitsubishi before launching Kwok Brothers in 1949 to trade agricultural goods. His genius moment came in 1961 when he made a bold, perfectly timed bet, buying up cheap sugar from India right before global prices exploded. That move earned him a nickname that stuck forever, the Sugar King of Asia. He later co-founded Wilmar International, which became the largest palm oil processing company in the world. The man operates on a scale most billionaires can only dream about. And here's the lesson that shaped his soul, straight from his mother. She came from a poor background, and she warned him over and over about how wealth can rot a person from the inside. She told him to stay frugal, stay humble, and always put society ahead of his own comfort. And he listened. Which brings us to that Mercedes. After Kuok had made it big, he wanted to do something nice for his mom, so for her 75th birthday, he bought her a beautiful luxury Mercedes-Benz. A loving gift, right? She refused it, flat out rejected it, and scolded him for wasting money on something so showy when those exact funds could have gone to feeding and helping the poor. Imagine being one of the richest men alive and getting told off by your own mother for being too flashy. That moment locked in his disdain for luxury for the rest of his life. And it shows in how he carries himself. Kuok has zero interest in luxury car fleets, and he's famous for being genuinely down to earth, the kind of tycoon who will happily ask an entry-level worker for advice and actually listen. No insulated bubble, no god complex, just a sharp, humble man who never let the billions go to his head. Because in the end, that's the thread connecting all 8 of these people. They were handed enough money to buy literally anything, and they decided the most powerful thing they could buy was the freedom to stay exactly who they always were. And those were 8 extremely rich Malaysian people who live like they're flat broke. Notice the pattern? Almost every one of them grew up with nothing, and instead of running from that past once they got rich, they held onto it like the most valuable thing they owned. So here's my question for you. If you woke up a billionaire tomorrow, could you honestly keep eating a quarter of a pineapple for breakfast? Drop your answer in the comments, smash that like button if these stories surprised you, and subscribe, because we drop stories like this every single week.